Hello and Assalamualaikum everyone. This is Abdul Basit. I hope that you all are fine. You all are doing great. Today I'm here again with a new and interesting video, and in this video I'm going to read the next 4 chapters of Gulliver's Travels Part 2, a Voyage to Brobdingnag. In the previous video I read and analyzed the first 4 chapters of this part. And in those 4 chapters there were a lot of comic events. I hope that you enjoyed those 4 chapters, and I would like to know in the comments below which comic event made you laugh more than the others. So which comic event was more interesting for you in the first 4 chapters of Gulliver's Travels Part 2, a Voyage to Brobdingnag. And this video is going to be much more interesting because there are another important aspects regarding the life in England, regarding the satirical approach of Jonathan Swift, and regarding the charge of misanthropy on Jonathan Swift. So watch the video till the end so that you may be able to understand these important aspects of this famous novel of Jonathan Swift. So let's get started. Chapter 5. One day, Gulliver's nurse took him into a garden. The palace dwarf shook the branches of an apple tree. A dozen of apples of a large size came down. One of them hit Gulliver on his back and knocked him down flat on his face. Once, while standing on a grassy plot, suddenly it started hailing. These hailstones were nearly 1800 times as large as those in Europe. Gulliver was badly injured by these hailstones. On another occasion, a dog seized Gulliver with its mouth and ran to the master. Fortunately, the dog was trained and it gently held Gulliver between its teeth. That is why he was not hurt. Once a kite, hovering in the sky, swooped upon him and would have carried him away in its talons, if he had not drawn his sword in time and taken shelter under a big tree. So there is one thing that is important here, that the dwarf shakes an apple tree and the apples fall on Gulliver. So this is because of jealousy of dwarf against Gulliver, because Gulliver is now the favorite of the queen and dwarf is jealous of Gulliver. He has developed the feelings of envy for Gulliver, and out of envy, out of jealousy, the dwarf is trying to harm Gulliver. So in the previous video I also talked about this, that Jonathan Swift here refers to the general human nature. Whenever we find someone being loved more than us, we, the human beings, develop the feelings of jealousy and hatred for that particular person. So here the dwarf symbolizes the general human nature. Once a monkey carried him off and, having set him on the top of a building, began to play with him as a cat plays with a mouse. It seemed that the monkey had taken Gulliver for a young one of its own species. It was after a good deal of effort that the king's men could rescue Gulliver from the monkey. As a result of this mishap, Gulliver had to spend about a fortnight in bed. The king asked Gulliver what would he have done in such circumstances in his own country. Gulliver told that there are no monkeys in his own country except those which were brought there as objects of curiosity from other places. He also told the king that he could deal with a dozen monkeys because they were not of the size of the elephant. The king laughed at him because he thought that Gulliver was merely boasting of his prowess. One day, Gulliver fell upon some cow dung in the path and found himself just in the middle up to his knees. He waded through it with some difficulty, and one of the attendants wiped him as clean as he could with his handkerchief. So here the comic event of the monkey reminds me of a very famous English movie, King Kong. And in that movie, if you have watched that movie, there is a huge sized monkey, and it seizes a girl, and it also protects the girl from the other enemies as well. So this event reminds me of that movie. Well, Gulliver is just like that girl who is being held by a huge sized monkey, but the king's men manage to rescue Gulliver from that monkey. And the other comic event is Gulliver's falling into the cow dung, and he is just besmeared with the cow dung. He is quite, covered with the cow dung because he is so small, and it must be the dung of a huge sized cow, and he must be in that dung, and he must be covered with all that. Chapter 6. Now Gulliver had become the favorite of both the king and the queen. He made a chair using some of the queen's hair from her comb and presented it to her. On another occasion, he made a purse for the queen and inscribed the queen's name on it in gold letters. In this way, he kept on pleasing the king and the queen. The king was a man of excellent understanding. One day, he asked some questions from Gulliver about the people and government of his native land. Gulliver told the king about the English Parliament, consisting of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, the members of which were selected with great care on the basis of their intellectual ability and moral integrity. He also told the king about the English courts of justice. It was at 5 different sessions of several hours each that Gulliver gave to the king all this information. So Gulliver gives all the information about England to the king. He tells him about the system of government, he tells him about the judiciary system of England, and he informs him about a lot of other things, and it takes a great deal of time to elaborate and explain all those things before the king. The king, having taken down from Gulliver's discourses, now asked him all kinds of questions. Many doubts and objections had arisen in the king's mind with regard to the information which Gulliver had given him. Gulliver did his best to satisfy the king's doubts, but the king was not convinced. The king's view was that the history of Gulliver's country seemed to him to be only a heap of conspiracies, rebellions, murders, massacres, revolutions, banishments, and very worst of effects that avarice, faction, hypocrisy, perfidiousness, cruelty, rage, madness, hatred, envy, lust, malice, and ambition could produce. Well, all these negativities, all these bad things are present in the land of Gulliver. So this is something that is very ridiculous, that is very shameful for the people of Gulliver's land. because they have got all these negativities, they have got all these evil things with them, and king is angry with this thing that Gulliver's people have got all these negativities. And what are those negativities? Those negativities are heap of conspiracies, rebellions, murders, massacres, revolutions, banishments, and very worst effects that avarice, faction, hypocrisy, perfidiousness, cruelty, rage, madness, hatred, envy, lust, malice, and ambition could produce. So all these negative things have been noticed by the king of Brobdingnag in the people of Gulliver's land. The king concluded his comments on Gulliver's account of his country with the following words. And what are those words? Those words are very important because these are in fact the historical words in the history of literature. And the king says, "But by what I have gathered from your own relation and the answers I have with much pains wringed and extorted from you, I cannot but conclude the bulk of your natives to be the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth." So this remark given by the king is quite notable here, because the king gives a derogatory remark about the people of Gulliver's land. He thinks that they are just like vermins. Okay, they are just like insects, and nature has suffered their presence because they are not free of vice, they are not free of evilness. Okay, so in the previous slide you saw all the vices that the people of Gulliver's land have. Well, this is basically the satire on all the human beings, and this particular remark given by the king also becomes the cause of the charge of misanthropy on Jonathan Swift, because this remark, this derogatory remark, this insulting and humiliating remark coming from the mouth of the king is basically coming out of the pen of Jonathan Swift. So this remark shows that these words are of a person who is a misanthrope. So because of this bitter and pungent satire, Jonathan Swift has been charged of misanthropy. But he is not a misanthrope. If we dig deep into the text of Gulliver's Travels, at the end he says that I write for the noblest end. I write for the noblest end, to guide and instruct mankind. So he is not a person who hates human beings. He is not a person who is a misanthrope, but in fact he is a philanthrope because he loves human beings. He wants human beings to recognize their follies, and he wants them to reform themselves so that they may be able to live a good life on earth. They may be able to make a difference on earth. Alright, so on the basis of this remark, we cannot say that Jonathan Swift is a misanthrope. Chapter 7. Gulliver is offended by the manner in which the king has dismissed the English as a lowly society. He tries to impress the king by telling him about some of the many great inventions of England, beginning with gunpowder. Gulliver goes into great detail about the power and effect of gunpowder and what the king could accomplish with it, saying that he could easily control everyone in Brobdingnag with gunpowder. The king is struck with horror and disgusted by Gulliver's proposals. He tells Gulliver that if he values his life, he should never mention gunpowder again. Gulliver cannot believe that the king would reject such an immense opportunity. Gulliver then discusses the general ignorance of the Brobdingnag people, including their simple laws and practices. Chapter 8. Gulliver has been in Brobdingnag for 2 years and strongly feels that it is time to leave. He is basically being treated as a pet, but the royal family does not want to part with him. Coincidentally, on a trip to the seashore, a giant eagle picks up Gulliver's traveling box and flies off with him. Realizing that the box is not edible, the eagle drops it into the sea. After some time, the box is picked up by a passing ship of Gulliver's normal proportions. Gulliver finds it very difficult to adjust to the size of things back in England. He feels much larger than the others. So after this voyage, Gulliver again returns to England from Brobdingnag as well, but his return to England gives him a lot of experience, a lot of insight, and he is able to understand about the vices, the follies, and the drawbacks of his own people. So I hope that you have got the complete understanding of these 4 chapters. If you like the video, if you like the content, please hit the like button and do not forget to subscribe to my channel if you have not already done yet. So thank you very much for watching the video. Bye bye, take care.